Children of single parents. Who was the worst person your parents have dated? Story 1. This will get buried, but the man my mom has been with for the last 20 plus years is a real piece of work. Highlight reel. He's so far behind on child support, he hasn't worked an over-the-table job in 20 years, so his wages won't be garnished. He's cheated on her multiple times and made it her fault. He's a raging alcoholic who used to hide his booze in my toy box. One time, he was staying with my mom's friend who had a bunch of expensive wine she gifted out. My mom got a bottle and went to drink it, only to realize it was watered-down soy sauce. He drank every single bottle and replaced them with various liquids to look full, replaced the corks and sealed the bottles. One time, the cops came to arrest him. I can't remember if it was related to a DUI or not paying child support, and he ran off. Turns out he was living in our neighbor's woodshed for a week. My mom rented his mom's house that he used to rent. When we moved in, he took the master bedroom and told my mom she could have the guest bedroom. Did the same thing a few years later with another property she rented. He used to groom us as children, and I only realized this recently. It's kind of messed up, to be honest, that at 30 years old I just now realized how bad it was. On weekends, me and his 3 daughters, had to be in bed by 8 p.m., or he would turn the light out, light candles, and we could massage him naked for literally hours. Of course, as young kids, 5 to 10 years, we didn't want to go to bed early, so we did it. He would praise us for how good we were and encourage the behavior. It became normal, so it was just a Friday, Saturday night thing we did at my mom's house. He also used to objectify everything, including our haircuts, would comment how good the cut looked, followed by an and the cartoons we watched. A few years ago, when I was 27, he sent me multiple intimately explicit messages on Facebook. I thought I was misreading them because he's known me since I was 7, so surely it was a mistake. I showed them to my boyfriend, who didn't even hesitate to tell me he was testing the waters. He was right. His youngest daughter recently got married. He was explicitly not invited to the wedding, showed up anyway, took someone else's place setting, cut in line for food, and had the audacity to complain that his barbecue was better. He also had the gall to apologize to me for how he treated my mom. I had cut my mom out about a year prior, and she thought he was the reason because surely her narcissistic behavior couldn't be it. So she made him apologize to try and get me to talk to her again. I told him I have nothing to say to him, and his daughter's wedding that he wasn't invited to was not the place for any conversation. If he terminated tomorrow, the world would be a better place. Man, that is a roller coaster of a first story. Doesn't sound like she has any love for her mother and her behavior either. I was wondering why she didn't even try to step in now for the way this guy was treating the mom, but sounds like they're both kind of garbage people. But I guess that's the way it is on this story. Story 2. My mom dated this one guy for 5+ years. She was already a bad parent, but with him, she acted like we didn't exist. They would argue and have intimacy like till 1 a.m. most nights, so I would go to school very tired. He didn't even acknowledge us, and she didn't care. The only time he did, he would snitch on me for small things. The few times she was home, they had her door locked, and sometimes I would try to talk to her because I was being bullied, and she didn't find out till years later. And at the time, I had been coping with never seeing my dad, and the door was locked, so I just go off and cry. I confronted her about it once, and she said he was the one who locked the door, but still shrew, I'm your kid. He was also cheating on her, and he pretty much beat her one day, and she made me call the police. They broke up again after that. That all happened 2 years ago. This was all while I was a preteen and up, and I was actually trying to bond with my mom. I still don't really have a connection with her because of him and don't love her. He still comes over to her house and spends the night. Also, he used to live off of her. He's never had a real job. Everyone sees him as a saint, and I still get questioned as to why I don't like him. Everyone was mad at me when I was 14 because he came over to my mom's house months after he beat her. He said hi to me, and I said, ew. My mom was a jerk. I now tell her to her face she's bad at picking men and that she's never going to be happy if she keeps picking homeless, abusive men. She's still in love with him, according to her. I'm so sorry you had to put up with that as a child. She really should have been there to support you. I hope you can escape from there as soon as possible. Looks like we've got a pattern going on over here. No love for the moms. Apparently, they are very bad or abusive mothers to begin with. The guys either don't acknowledge the kids or objectify them, don't hold down jobs, and just sponge off of the moms for all this. Let's see if that pattern continues. Story 3. My parents aren't the best people in the world. Looking at my old comments and posts, you can kind of get why. My mom especially has a horrible history with men. Most of them end up in jail, have been in jail, or are absolutely crazy. The previous one had to be the craziest person I've ever met. In the beginning, he was obviously using my mom for money and food. They were constantly going out, and he kept manipulating her that he was madly in love. They eventually moved into our house after dating for only 2 months. The first time I met him was actually him waking up in the morning and I was on the way out to school. Months and months later, my mom was about to break up with him as he had no job, the entire relationship, and was contributing nothing for our family. They break up, and that's when his true side comes out. He stopped taking all medications, so he became manic from bipolar, stopped eating altogether, and stalked every move my mom did. My mom, being an idiot, read that as a sign of love and got back together with him. They moved in, and the same stuff happened again. This time, he threatened her life and attempted to unalive her in a Salvation Army with his pocket knife. Police were called and charges were pressed by the store and my mother. He went to jail for 90 days and my mom has a restraining order against him. You'd think that would stop everything, but it didn't. My mom and him got together one last time. Everything seems to go great, but my mom and her ex were in therapy separately to deal with their problems. He has a job and everything. All of a sudden, he stops taking his meds and goes manic again. My mom kicked him out that night and blocked every single way of contact. He's stalked again and threatened to unalive her. It's been 3 months and he's in jail now, hoping it stays that way. This one, it looks like there's a possible light at the end of the tunnel, but it just follows the same patterns of the first 2 stories. I really want this one to be where she turns her life around and just completely ends this cycle. I really hope that's it. Story 4. We'll call him Jose. Younger than my mom, chronically unemployed, a drinker, violent, and literally illiterate, but good looking, so my mom was smitten. My mom was from a good, in name, family. She had education, she had 2 little daughters. And she brought this scumbag to our peaceful little apartment, and he settled in right away, beating the hell out of all of us, impregnating my mom 4 times, running off for months, coming back, never paying child support. When he was around, he mercilessly beat on us, and my mom just stood by like a freaking jerk, not intervening. One morning, my little brother, who was maybe 2, woke up and was hopping up and down in his crib for attention. Jose, a grown man, smacked that poor baby so hard in the face that the baby flew across the crib and hit the other side and slid down. Finally, my mom got diagnosed with lupus, and Jose found out and literally abandoned her at the pharmacy. Years later, we found out that he had been intimately abusing my older sister. I am still so mad at my mom for the decade of bullscat we endured with that man. He was literally a cancer, and she couldn't summon the self-esteem to leave him, even when he was beating us with extension cords. There's a poem by Nayara Waheed called "Before You Get That Key Made" that should be handed to every single mother. Forget your loneliness. Protect your kids. 1. I'm so sorry you endured this. 2. I wanted to high-five you through the screen about that last sentence of yours. Forget your loneliness. Protect your kids. This isn't talked about enough because so many people endure horrible things when dating and having children. Story 5. Not sure if this exactly counts, but my mom and dad had split custody over me, and I would be seeing my dad every other weekend. My dad married my stepmom Jenny, who is the most evil person I have ever met in my life. It wasn't immediate, though. For the first few years, she was great, and I loved being over because my actual mom is a terrible alcoholic. But when she had her own kids, something changed. I no longer was allowed to leave my own room except to go to the bathroom, so I was kept prisoner, completely isolated for all of my childhood every other weekend. But the isolation wasn't the worst of it. She made sure to come in and tell me I was fat and ugly and that nobody liked me. She emotionally abused me as much as she could and told me if I told my dad, I would ruin his life because I would ruin the marriage, and I ate that stuff up. There's countless horrible things she did, like having her kids beat me with pots and pans to wake me up, throwing food at me. The list goes on. The worst thing I think she had done was when my grandpa died, the only real father figure in my life. She said, "How does it feel knowing you'll never see your grandpa again?" and then laughed at me. But the worst part about it is that I thought I was doing the right thing telling nobody because my dad seemed happy with her. Now I've come to realize even if I had told my dad, he likely wouldn't have left her, being the freaking coward he is. I still don't understand how she could justify abusing a kid who already came from a broken home, but I've moved past all of that. I've long since cut them from my life, so curse you, Jenny. I hope you live an unfulfilling life. Story 6. I can think of 2. First of all, my biological father. They got back together for a few weeks. He was a jerk. I recently got my first pet, a ginger kitten, but I was having previously unknown allergy issues with it. Things were stabilizing for me, though, and I was getting used to it, when one day, my new cat disappeared. My dad admitted he let it out the door because he knew I'd been struggling. I spent weeks searching but never found it. The second was my stepdad. He was actually a good guy and head over heels in love with my mom. I actually miss him a lot. The reason he was one of the worst? Well, my mom died when I was 17, and overnight my stepdad changed. Within a month, he was in a relationship with another family member, and suddenly he was violent and abusive. Left me with no food or money, attacked me for accidentally breaking an ornament of his, and ultimately forced me to run away from home. I was couch hopping for 9 months and never spoke to him again. It's kind of hard to envision someone that close to you changing that quickly and that drastically overnight. Have you ever had someone just turn on you that quickly that way? How did it work out for you? Story 7. He was called Greg. He was an abusive jerk. He used to lock me and my brothers out in the rain while my mom was at work. Had no way of contacting her before kids had phones. He did it in all weathers. He broke my mom's arm in front of me and my brothers. He grabbed my face so hard his nail left a cut in my cheek. My mom and my 2 aunties got their own back, though. My mom stole his change jar. His change jar had notes in it. There were no 1 pence or 2 pence, only silver plus. One auntie smashed every single thing he had. Car windows, house windows, TVs, everything. She also promised to beat him whenever she saw him. She's kept that promise and has hit him 7 times so far on nights out. My other auntie kept reporting him to his boss for things he hadn't done, but they couldn't disprove. Like being horrible, swearing at her. He was fired. He was a real piece of trash. And the actions of my family may have been drastic, if not illegal, but he most definitely deserved this. Ouch, that hurts. Story 8. My mom dated an alcoholic. He beat her right in front of me and my brother. One time, she was taking a shower, and he grabbed her by the hair and threw her outside when she was wet and naked. Everyone could see, and it was humiliating to watch. I couldn't do anything. He was bigger and stronger than my brother and I. She stayed with this abusive butthole for like 4 years. I became traumatized, and I hate alcohol. Alcohol scares me so much, but lately I've been trying to get over it. Alcohol shouldn't scare me forever. I've been letting my boyfriend drink, and I've freaked out a couple of times, but the past couple days I've been getting more comfortable around him drinking. It's not fair to freak out when he drinks just because of a bad experience. He's not the same guy. He won't hurt me. You're really brave to be fighting your fears to be more comfortable around something that caused so much pain in your past. I hope it all works out for you. Story 9. Loretta. My dad is an alcoholic and all-around awful person, so the fact that he found someone at all was amazing. I adored her at first. Then the crazy started to come out. She's French and had 2 preteen boys at the time. He stopped giving my mom money for us because he had to support her and her kids and complained about it constantly as if he didn't have a choice and he hated those boys. She did a lot of shady stuff to my dad, which didn't bug me, but then she was drunk one night and started texting my mom saying that she needs to straighten out my dad because he's abusive and horrible. Not wrong. My mom responded with something like, "It's not my responsibility, but you should seek proper help if it's that bad," to which Loretta lost her stuff. Calling my mom a runt and to stay away from her man? My mom went through years of crazy with my dad, and they were finally at a place where they could be friends or family without drama, and this crazy butthole comes in stirring trash. She was horrid. The woman he's now with is significantly better. They both drink together, but don't seem to be hateful drunks. My mom only had 2 boyfriends. Both were wonderful, especially the guy who lived with us. I miss him and hope he's doing well. This seems to be like the first story I've read in here that doesn't seem to go all out and out Disney. There's like a little bit of nuance. I mean, this guy is with a new person and they still drink, but they're not hateful drunks? Something tolerable? Do you think this person has just been around alcoholics for so long that she's probably tolerating a little bit more of drinking than should probably be necessary? What do you think? Story 10. My mom dated a dude who beat the living hell out of me. Dude and his brother took turns punching me in the face while the other held me down. I was about 11 at the time. My mom didn't bother to remove these turds from her life either. I'm now in my 40s and still have scars on my face to remind me about it. A few months later, while I was at summer camp paid for by a charity organization, the same dude put her in the hospital. A few weeks after that, I went to live with my aunt and uncle. She stayed with a dude. I haven't spoken to her in close to 20 years. So very sorry you experienced that. Story 11. Well, as far as my moms are concerned, my bio dad is the clear winner. Mongrel thought feeding a baby Coke and beer till she passed out was parenting. Then he thought that beating the hell out of anyone who questioned him and locking his daughter in the crawl space till she stopped crying was healthy parenting. Managed to cut him out of my life at 16. At 19, he tried to shoot the cops that came to answer the domestic violence call. He missed, but the cops firing back riddled him. 86-year-old neighbor with bullets. He's up for parole in 4 years. None of his girlfriends like me, so they don't give a care. Some of them enjoyed it. Moms are not perfect either, but I'm gonna take emotional neglect over bio dad's nonsense any day.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 12. He lost his job 2 weeks after they got married and never found another one, so he laid around the house watching TV. The most common words he said to me were to go away. The living room was his space, and he didn't want me in it when he was watching baseball, which was most of the time. Sometimes, when my mom was gone, he'd scream at me top of his lungs. I was 8. He didn't clean, and he cooked for me twice. Burnt hot dogs. And he acted like he was doing me a huge favor serving me awful pan-burnt hot dogs. His son visited every other weekend, and I had to share a bedroom with him, even though I begged them to put me somewhere else. He would wait for me to fall asleep and try to suffocate me with bedsheets, pillows, or his hands. Story 13. My dad dated a lady who made us take Benadryl all the time so we would sleep the weekends we had to spend with him. Well, one of the side effects of too much Benadryl is hallucinations. So I would flip and say that I saw spiders everywhere and was afraid to shower because I legit saw spiders coming out of the shower head. She would then hold me under and force me to shower while I was freaking the hell out. My mother would force Benadryl on me on Sunday nights when I had a big test the following Monday because I would never sleep well on Sundays. Apparently, a child's test score is far more important than a warning label that says, "Do not use it to make a child sleep." Story 14. My mom hooked up with a U.S. Navy guy while his ship was in port. Then the ship left without him. We abandoned our lives while the three of us lived in a car for 6 months trying to avoid the shore patrol, who we found out were not even looking for us when we were all arrested for living in a Kmart parking lot. He went to the brig, and I didn't have any supervision for another 6 months as my mom spent all her time sitting outside his cell. One morning, about a year after the whole thing started, she went in to see him and was told to wait because his wife and 5 kids were already visiting. This was news to her. He had insisted that he was single. She left in tears, and when she returned later that day, he was gone, and she never heard anything from him again. I hope the wife found out. Story 15. Currently happening. My mom is dating an illicit substance-addicted, jobless loser who lost custody of his daughter years back. He's been to prison twice and doesn't ever care to clean himself up. He's abused her, hit her, stolen from her, and even got her pregnant, and is now why I have an 11-month-old half-sister. He steals her bank cards all the time and takes her car out at night to go and take stuff off the side of the road to buy a bunch of junk. Our whole house, side yard, and backyard look like a junkyard of all the stuff he's stolen, gathered from the road, or bought with her money. I'm not exaggerating either, it's very bad. They've been together for over 2 years, and it makes me angry and sad at the same time to know my mom is with him. She's smart, has an 8-to-6 job, and went to college for 4 years just to end up barely being able to afford the water and electric bills. I wish he would kick him out. He deserves to be arrested for doing horse and the anxious white powder in our backyard with his friends he brings over without notice. Story 16. My 5th grade teacher. My mom also worked at the school, so all the kids knew her. It was awkward. My best friend's dad when he was separating from his wife. I don't know how much dating happened, but there was definitely something going on between them. Also, some creepy dude she met online who would only sleep with all the lights on, and once threatened me when he thought I told my mom what her birthday gift was. Eventually, she had to call the police on him when he wouldn't stop trying to get into our house. Those were the worst, but every single one of them was bad in some way. I think all the same dudes knew to stay away from my mom. Story 17. My mom used to date a guy who was an alcoholic when I was 14, which effectively made her drink more. He also gave me a very creepy vibe. He used to compliment me and my sister on our looks, but not in a "you look nice today" way. It was weirder than that. He would touch my feet or legs if I was sitting on the sofa also. He also caressed my face one time. One night, I also overheard him taking advantage of my mom when she was drunk. Kept hearing her tell him no. That wasn't a fun night. I told my mom about how he creeped me out, but she brushed it off. I've met around 20 guys that she's dated over the years. Most of them sucked, but he was the worst. Thankfully, she isn't with him anymore. Story 18. His name was Jeremy, the only man my mother ever had around me. He would beat me and try to bribe me with toys, but I wasn't a normal child. I wasn't interested in toys and couldn't be manipulated. A very long story short, I told my big uncle, the criminal, the one that was fiercely protective of my mother and Jeremy was literally never seen or heard from again. Whatever my uncle did to make him go, he did a dang fine job. He made sure I knew he was always there for me. Props to your uncle. I wish I had someone like that. Story 19. My mom dated a guy named Mike. He had this weird rule that when he called the house, this was 1997-98 before we had caller ID, he would let it ring twice, hang up, and call again when we would be good to answer it. I was probably 10 during this. I remember not liking him and would answer the phone first ring every time just to tick him off. He wasn't a bad guy, just a giant douche. This is absolutely 10-year-old savagery. Story 20. My dad's ex-fiancée. She was almost our evil stepmother until one day she decided to call me a fat, lazy shrew, and my dad realized how awful she was to my sister and I. That was the day I learned how much he actually cared for us as well. He dumped her butt and kicked her out of the house. Her awful daughter left too, and it was finally peaceful at my dad's again. He dated her on and off for years afterwards until she went back with her ex-husband. My dad has sworn her off for good now, which I'm glad for since she was a toxic person. I wish he could find someone worth his time, though. I know he gets lonely. Story 21. My dad started dating a woman who firmly believed that I was part of his old life and that he needed to cut ties with me. I was 14 and became terrified my mom would find someone who would do the same, and I'd end up with no family. OMG, same, but I actually got kicked out for it because she was jealous of me being a woman, 20, while she had clearly thought I'd be 5, like her children. Story 22. His name is Joe. He's a sociopath who emotionally abused my family for years while he and my mom were married, got physical enough where all the females of the house were forced to live in the basement. He is incredibly sexist. I lurked at my workplace for hours when I was 16, afraid to come home. Even now, his siblings live in fear that our family will be hurt or unalived by him. I still see him from time to time. He comes to my workplace to catch up. Story 23. My dad was engaged to this extremely religious woman who believed firmly that the apocalypse was coming and most of the family would burn in hell. I didn't think it could get worse. But then he was at Walmart and found a substance-addicted paid spicy companion that he replaced her with and started smoking with her and doing crystal Walter White. It was like a 180 in the worst possible direction. He's single now and it's much better. Story 24. My father dated a weird lady who used to casually tell me how he was an amazing lover. I was like 9, so disturbing. I'm also pretty sure she tried to unalive me once. She had really long fake nails and lost one as she was making cabbage rolls, but didn't say anything until after I almost choked to unaliving on it. My choking did not seem to surprise her one bit. She didn't move a muscle to try to help me or even apologize after. Story 25. Ronnie. He was a carny that my mother met at the local fair. Whirlwind relationship that didn't last long. He didn't appreciate being dumped. He broke into the basement of our house late at night and used a set of tires and gasoline to start a fire under the stairs. I woke up to a house fire. I taught my kids to tie their shoes and never trust a carny. Frickin' carnies. Small hands reek of cabbage. Story 26. One waste called Darren. I had a viral infection once that mimicked meningitis, and he kept banging on about if I perished he wasn't cleaning it up and that I may need a wheelchair. I punched him once when he tried throwing my cat outside into the rain. He's taken off now, thank the deities. Just reading this, I want to find Darren and throw him outside. In the rain. In a wheelchair. With meningitis. Story 27. I mean, there were so many, but I think it's a tie between the pathological liar, the one with anger management issues, and the weed addict with the thumb ring. Cool it with the thumb ring. I'm trying to eat lunch here. Story 28. My mom got back together with her old high school boyfriend for whatever reason. Guy was like 60, but looked about a minute away from perishing. Super lanky, reeked of cigarettes. Not a bad guy, but his general hygiene and health made him hell to be around. Just would like to say to you, happy cake day. Story 29. Definitely the guy who, after over a year of dating my mom and seemingly caring for both her and I, called her one night and said he never loved her and to not contact him again. No signs showing this is how he felt. He broke my mom for a while. I definitely wanted to find him. No, I want to find that son of a shrew. Story 30. My dad dated a girl who was 24. I'm 18 and I have an older brother who's 22, and she was with him for 2 months when she threw away all of my deceased mom's good pans. They were passed on to me, claimed to be addicted to horse, which we later found out was a lie, and hooked my 13-year-old little brother up with a 19-year-old. Story 31. A semi-famous at the time Elvis impersonator / singer for a band that had some success, and he's incredibly cocky and arrogant. My mom ended up marrying him, but they live in different states and only see one another here and there. It turned out to be a marriage of convenience after a few years. Story 32. My mom dated this guy named Rick. He always smelled like beef. All the time. He would come over and the living room reeked of beef. I would beg my mom to let me leave whenever he came over, but she said that would be rude. So I just had to be in the same house with that rotting meat basket called a man. He was over one morning when I had a late start. I went to school, and a girl called me beef shrew. I cried for hours. Rick and my mom broke up because he got a job in another state and they hadn't been dating too long, so they decided to split up. My mom still won't tell me why he smelled like beef. She says it's his personal business. Story 33. My dad dated this lady that had like 4 kids. They lived with us for a couple months because their apartment wasn't ready. It was weird. Also, she's the lady my dad cheated on my mom with, and she cheated on her husband. Story 34. My stepdad, after being with my mom for 18 years, he finally told me he and a friend of his unalived my dad, or possibly the butthole she's with now. Story 35. This woman brought a loaded pistol to a party my dad was at because she couldn't get in contact with him. This was before cell phones. Story 36. My half-brothers were children of a single parent, and I think for them it was their stepfather. He hit and punched our mother. I mean, he was an alcoholic. I'm so happy that my mother now has a wonderful relationship with my dad. Story 37. Nobody. And that's the worst part. In her defense, she was busy raising us and working like a dog. She was bitter and now is lonely. Story 38. My old stepdad is in prison for unaliving and dismembering his girlfriend.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.